Hello, YouTube. I'm not chilling here. I've been wanting to make this video for a while, but I've been kind of wondering how I'm actually going to approach it. And I might end up making a few videos about this topic, actually, just because it's quite it's quite a big thing to talk about. So I think I probably should talk about it in different stages. But what I want to talk about today is my past as a Mormon and how that affected my life. Now, if you're not really familiar with what Mormons believe or what Mormons are like or anything like that, I would actually direct you to the South Park episode about the little Mormon boy that moves into town. It's actually fairly accurate. There's a few things that they missed out and a few things that they kind of misrepresented, but honestly, I thought it was pretty accurate and it was pretty fucking funny as well. So, if you want to just kind of get a flavour of what Mormons are about, I would say go do that, and then maybe do a little bit of research on Mormons after that. Now, I'm referring to the mainstream Mormon church as well, by the way. I'm not. There's two Mormon churches. There's the mainstream church, which has something like, I don't know, 15 million members or something like that worldwide. And then there's like a little cult version of the Mormon church, which actually has a slightly different name. It's like the cult. It's like the mainstream Mormon church calls themselves the Latter-day Saints, and the LDS church sometimes they're known as. Whereas the cult Mormon church has a different name, and I actually forget it right now. But they've altered that thing. It's like LDS something with an extra letter on the end. I can't remember what that extra letter means. But yeah, I didn't grow up in like some weird cult with like where my dad had loads of wives or anything like that. So we'll get rid of that just from the get go, just because that is not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about growing up Mormon. I'm talking about like the kind of standard, kind of, I guess, Utah based Mormon, mainstream Mormon culture stuff. But it's all the way all over the world, and we have Mormon churches here in the UK. There's quite a lot of them actually, and I was born into that church, and I grew up in that church, and I stopped going when I was about 16, 17 roughly, and it was a very weird experience for me looking back, because I'm not really religious anymore. In fact, I'm quite against religious thinking, and that's not just about believing in God and stuff like that, but like religiously, like believing in things like rigidly. I'm kind of against all that type of stuff now. Well, I am and I'm not. Like, I feel like it's useful for certain things that are just definitely good and for the benefit of you and other people. But I don't know. I think, but I'm also very into the idea of being very open to new ideas and questioning everything as well. Now, I want to talk about the way that what I really want to talk about. The first thing that I want to talk about in regards to my past with the Mormon Church is the way it actually affected me as a person and how it still affects me today. There's another prominent ex-Mormon on YouTube, Lacey Green, who also has spoken little bits and pieces about how it's affected her. I think she's bisexual, and and the way that they pressured her about her sexuality is like influenced how she feels about herself and stuff like that. And I have a kind of similar story to tell, maybe a little bit more depressing in a way, but a kind of a similar thing. So the Mormon Church is weird, because obviously it's a Christian thing, so there's a lot of Christian values going on, but it's very conservative in that it's very driven on everyone needs to kind of be on board, because basically the whole thing about it is that in normal churches, if you get married, it's till death do us part. But in the Mormon Church, the idea is that you and the whole family, when you all die, are all going to be together in heaven. To like, there's no death to his part. It's like death is just the next chapter in this family's life. So if your kid's like getting out of line or anything like that and sinning, then that's like a big problem, because then your whole like kind of family is at risk. And that does create some issues, because it meant that my mum and my dad used to enforce the Mormon kind of code on us pretty strictly. And that had a pretty bad fallout in our relationship, because, you know, as you get older, you start to realise that, you know, your mum and dad aren't perfect. They've done things in the past which contradict their beliefs now. And you start to feel like you can't trust them, and you question them. And obviously that creates a lot of rifts. And especially the way that my mum and dad used to go about trying to enforce this kind of stuff on us as well. I mean, I don't want to make my mum and dad out to be like bad people or anything like that, because they're not. They're good people. I think they just struggled when it came to the thought of raising children. My mum and dad had children very young. They had me when they were 19, and I don't think they really planned it out that much. And they didn't really know what they were doing, and they started talking to the missionaries and realised that maybe religion was a good thing to help raise me in a moral way. So that's why they kind of went into the church in the first place, because they weren't originally Mormons. Most people are not really born as Mormons in... well, it's about 50-50. It's usually mum and dad's are converts, and then the kids grow up in it. So it's like 50-50 when it comes to Mormons. But yeah, I want to talk about how the way that this all affected me was really strange, because I always struggled with believing in the gospel and God and everything. And there were times where I really believed it, and I really wanted it to be true, and I was really really into it, like scarily into it. It's so scarily that if there were passages about martyrdom in the Book of Mormon, about, you know, killing people in some kind of jihad or holy war, and that's being my ticket to heaven, I may have even actually considered that, would have considered that as some of my darker points in life, just because I did also then believe in that at the same time. So, you know, that it's part of the reason why I'm so against like this dogmatic, like, religious thinking, is because of how out of hand it can get. Sorry, I look like shit today. I look like absolute shit. I'm making a hash of this video. I don't know how to address being a Mormon and how it affected me. It's such a massive thing, like religion, like, because it warps your world. Like when you come out of being that staunchly religious, it really affects your mind and like how you view the world and how you view yourself. Because I remember when I first came out of the church, I instantly started researching like all other religions, like Islam, Hinduism. I started trying to find the oldest religion, because I thought maybe because it's the oldest, maybe that's the truer one. And I found out about some Mesopotamian religions and stuff. And when I was reading it, I was just like, I can't believe this. This is just stupid. It's basically essentially like, you know, sun gods and blah blah blah, and kind of paganistic, I guess, in a way, and pluralistic gods and stuff. And I was just like, yeah, I can't gel with this. If I don't believe this Mormon stuff, I'm finding it difficult to believe this shit. And eventually I settled on being atheist, but I never said never. I never said that God or something like God could never exist, or that there was some explanation for us being here, or maybe souls exist or something like that. Maybe there's some purpose to our consciousness or something like that. I would never rule out those kinds of things, and I think that is partly to do with the Mormon thing. But another thing that the Mormon thing made me think about was mortality. It made me think about mortality from a very young age. Because they're constantly talking about dying and going to heaven. so I've had a big fascination with that kind of thing for a long time, whether it be like serial killers or just even the philosophies of death and how to view it, which is actually quite relevant to me today, actually, because very recently my granddad passed away. And I mean, I've been to a lot of funerals in my life, actually, to be honest, and but this one hit the hardest, I think, just because my granddad was a big part of my life. And it is difficult to think about. But I do think that having this kind of setup in life where I've been able to hash out these ideas about death and mortality and my own mortality and other people's mortality. I mean, honestly, when I was a teenager and I was some angsty little goth kid, I used to envision my parents dying, my grandparents dying, and my sisters dying, and things like that, to try and mentally prepare myself. And really all I was doing was putting myself through mental duress, because all I would do was like cry my eyes out and just be like, and it wasn't it wasn't good. But in a way it was kind of useful, because it means that I kind of taught myself some coping mechanisms early. And, you know, you're never really prepared for the actual passing. You're never really prepared for that, you know. It's always different in reality. How you're going to feel, how everyone else reacts, and all the rest of it. But I do feel that I've been able to handle it a lot better than if I didn't have that. Like, if I didn't have any of those things, and with the type of granddad that I had, I was very close to, I think it would have been so much more difficult. Like, this whole thing would be so much more difficult than it is. And I don't know, I kind of value that the Mormon Church gave me that. Like, there's definitely things I value that I got from the Mormon Church and how they affected me. There's some other things that didn't affect me very well, though, and I will side with Lacey Green on this about sexuality. It did affect my sexuality. My mum and dad used to say to me, well, not my dad, but my mum used to say to me that if I was gay, then she'd disown me. And that was her way, because I think she always knew that I wasn't really gay anyway, but I think it was her way of really trying to reinforce that ideal. And she is still a little bit weird about it now as well, to be honest, because they're not Mormon anymore either, by the way. My parents, none of my family are Mormon anymore, although they do talk about it sometimes, but they're not really Mormon anymore. And yeah, it was it did affect my sexuality, and it affected it in a pretty bad way, because when I was a teenager I did experiment. Experimented. One of my friends, two of my best friends in high school were gay, although one of them I didn't know at the time, because he doesn't come off gay whatsoever, and he only came out a few years ago. So, you know, he never even told me, even though I've been his best friend since we were really young. So, you know, I don't know why that was. I think maybe he needed to discover himself, but that's another story. But one of my other friends, one of my best friends, he was gay, and we did fool around and stuff. And I did fool around with another lad as well at school, who was gay as well. And this affected me, because it meant I had no one to really talk to about those feelings or what I was going through. And in the end, I did realise that I wasn't gay. But it took me to, you know, messing around and stuff like that to really discover that I wasn't really that into it. Like, you know, I mean, I could do it, but I wasn't, like, fully invested in it. I felt way more invested in being with women. Although I do find men attractive sometimes still today. I mean, you see this nail varnish I've got on. I actually DJ in drag from time to time. And again, that to me is like a slight liberation from the whole Mormon thing. But again, I'll talk about drag another time. But I want to get to the core thing of how it really affected me with the whole anti-gay thing. Is that when I was a teenager, I was sexually abused by my uncle. And In fact, he actually groomed me from when I was young, from at a young age. But I didn't realise this because it was very subtle manipulations and things like that from when I was a kid that I didn't actually fully think about until I went to counselling for the whole thing. And yeah, it was. Yeah, and that all kind of came to a head as a teenager, where my uncle kind of took advantage of my little Mormon naivety, because I didn't really know much about the sexual world, and my uncle, who is gay, he was like my window in a way to the outside world and what the people think about certain sexual things. And I told him about my, I said I thought maybe I was gay because I was messing around with this lad at school and stuff like that. And as soon as I told him about that, everything changed in our relationship. And he kind of took advantage of a lot of things, and he started to encourage me to masturbate around him and stuff like that, and say that it was like normal and stuff. And I'd honestly just take his word for it. And I don't know, after a while I started to as I got a little bit older, I started to realise that this stuff wasn't really normal, and it wasn't quite right what was going on. And if things escalated, and I started to really resent myself for letting it happen. But I felt trapped because I didn't know what to do, because if I told my mum, I thought that she would disown me. I also thought that it would ruin and break up the family. I also thought I'd be considered some kind of crazy sinner and whatnot as well. And there was loads of things going through my mind, and it really bothered me. And so I didn't actually say anything about it for a good year. I actually ended it with him. I was really scared to, because I thought that he'd get violent or threaten to expose me in some way or whatever. But when I told him, I said, "Look, I don't want to do this anymore because it's just hurting me too much. It's hurting me emotionally, a lot, and I'm finding myself hating myself, and I'm also hating you, and I don't want this to carry on anymore." And he was just okay with it, and I really hated myself for that, because I wish that I'd have stood up to him and told him what I thought earlier. But what happened was, eventually it did all come out, and he ended up actually going to prison for what happened for a few years. But again, I'll talk more about that experience later. I mean, what I was really trying to get at is that the way that the Mormon Church and the religious doctrine influenced how I thought about that. Like, if I had a normal, and this is, I think, perhaps why Lacey Green does what she does as well. I mean, I don't know what her story is or why, but having a good sexual education is important in a lot of ways. I wouldn't say that you need to start too early with kids, because I think that's a little dicey. But I do think that, as a teenager, it's good to speak with teenagers about this kind of stuff, because, like it or not, they're going to be interested in this kind of stuff, and it's better for them to know what is the right and wrong things. And I feel like I wasn't clearly given that, or given those tools to discern what was right or wrong. And that, that's obviously affected me now for the rest of my life. I've got to live with that. I've got to deal with that a lot. In fact, I had to deal with it at my granddad's funeral because my uncle was there. And that was pretty fucked up in a lot of ways. But I don't know, man. I dealt with it pretty well. But again, I'll talk about that side of my life in more detail in another video. But another thing, the way that Mormon, and this is something I value from the Mormon Church. We'll go back to some things that I value from the Mormon Church. But the Mormon Church, unlike any other church, actually, used to get us to question why and if the church was real. They used to tell us that if you didn't believe in God, or you wasn't sure if the Book of Mormon was true, then to basically to pray and ask if it's true. And yeah, I mean, I thought that was actually pretty impressive of a religion to do that. I mean, like, not many religions would really say that. Not on a regular basis, at least. Sorry, it's just my mum coming through. Just letting the dog out before bed. If you want to say hello to YouTube, Mum. What? I can edit this out, so it's not a big deal. But you can say hi. You can say hi to YouTube if you want.
I'm gonna give you a kiss.
Well, that's Mother coming through. No, I'll let her back in, yeah? But yeah, okay. Think back to another thing that I value. So because they always told us to ask why, and they always asked us to question if it was real and stuff like that, and to pray and whatever. That's kind of carried on into my life after that. I mean, they really hammered that into us, actually. And yeah, man, now I can't help it. It's like a reflex. Like, if somebody shows me some kind of news article or whatever it is, I'm just instantly skeptical about pretty much everything. And in a way, that's quite a valuable thing to have, because it means that I'm not, or at least less susceptible to being gullible. I think I was probably more gullible while I was a Mormon, and perhaps the few years afterwards. But now, as I'm an older man, I think that I'm way less prone to the bullshit now, and that's quite a valuable thing. So, you know, it's not all bad when it comes to, like, religion and dogmatic thinking and stuff. That's not all bad. But I would say that you can get similar effects just by teaching your kids, like, certain principles, like just always ask why, always ask questions, no questions too stupid, things like that. Like, you can, there's different ways to, like, think about things. Do you want? Okay, just one sec. Ugh, bloody dogs. But yeah, it's I've lost my train of thought now. Yeah, it's not all bad, but like I say, there's just different ways to get the same effect without having to go through all this kind of rigmarole. And yeah, I mean, honestly, I would like to be able to speak to someone like Lacey Green about her experiences of being a Mormon. I've never actually been able to talk to any ex-Mormons before. I think the only one I've ever been able to speak to is someone who I grew up with in church, who is also an ex-Mormon. He's perhaps the only other ex-Mormon I've been able to talk to, other than, like, my sisters and my mum and dad and stuff, obviously. But I've never been able to speak to someone, especially who had, like, an American version of it as well, so I don't know what that's like. But I'd love to be able to talk about those experiences, just because like, I don't know, it's so weird. I don't have anyone to really relate to with any of that stuff, and I'd love to be able to speak to her about her experiences, how she felt about it all and how it affected her, but also just, like, some of the good stuff, and just reminisce about certain things. I want to see if I can connect with her with certain things. I want to see how far down the rabbit hole she actually went with the whole Mormon thing, like if she went to conventions and things like that. You know. But I'll leave it there for now, because that's all I can really think of when it comes to the Mormon thing at this point. You know, we're coming up to 25 minutes. I don't want it to be too long of a video, but I'll try and think of something a little bit more structured next time when I talk about the whole Mormon thing. I was just kind of freeballing. I kind of just did this, honestly, just to waste a bit of time. But I hope it was, I don't know, maybe enlightening. I don't know. I hope it was okay. I know it's a bit roughshod, you know, interruptions and things like that. But I hope it enlightened you a little bit to how religion can affect you. I just want to add one more side note, actually, just before I go, because I just thought about it, and it's something that I want to make clear. One of the reasons why I can be so anti-Islam is because of how strict of a Mormon I was. And I feel that a lot of people, especially on the left, are usually atheist through and through and have never really experienced a truly religious lifestyle. And they don't understand how that can affect your psyche. And I do understand that, and it is why I have to question Islam as much as I do, because when I see people like Linda Sarsour or whatever the fuck her name is, chatting shit about Sharia, being like, Sharia's just having interest-free loans. Isn't that cool? And yeah, it is cool, Linda Sarsour. Yeah, sure. But then you're also giving up, like, basically all the rights you have as a woman as well. So it's just like, well, what's the trade-off? No interest or just no rights? Like, so it's... I don't know. I don't know what kind of bullshit she gets fed in her mosque, because all different mosques have different approaches and they all cherry-pick in different ways, and... Honestly, I feel that if you're a Muslim or any religious person and you're cherry-picking from your religion, I think it's about high time you question whether or not you should even believe in this religion anymore. I honestly think that. You should at least have that conversation with yourself. And if you do truly feel like you need to believe it, then whatever. But surely there's a way to just believe in a God and live in life well without having to adhere to some kind of strict, very particular religious ideology. And I think that could be quite fruitful of a conversation to have with yourself. Now, I understand that's a little bit more dicey as a Muslim to go through those motions and say that you're ex-Muslim and stuff like that, because some of the repercussions that can come. I mean, I wasn't scared as a Mormon that there were going to be people coming after me. You know, I wasn't scared of that kind of thing. I wasn't scared that my mum and dad were going to throw me out of the house or whatever for not being Mormon anymore. Although I'm sure that does happen from time to time. Not on the scale of Islam, but I'm sure it does happen. I can imagine it, totally. So, you know, it's... Yeah, I mean, that's why I get so anti-Islam. So I just want to kind of clear that up as well. Like, I'm not doing it because I'm racist. In fact, I've been friends with a lot of Muslims over the years, and I've even had these conversations with them, not trying to convince them out of their religion, because I never like to do that. I think that's a bit too far. It's more of a case of like, you know, are you definitely sure? Like, what is it? How is it benefiting your life? Or, you know, and if they give me an answer that they think is adequate, I'll go, okay, fair enough. You know, I won't be like a complete dick about it. I won't be like, oh, your religion's just garbage, man. Just, you know, be a cunt. You know, I try and have a reasoned discussion with them, and I just, you know, and if I feel like I'm taking a step too far, then I'll start retracting, because I do think, you know, if you're ever going to get anywhere with talking to people about, like, their religion and stuff like that, and actually not converting them away from it, but at least planting some kind of seed to say, maybe there's a better way, or whatever, like, I think it's not in berating them, and it's not in berating their religion either. You know, I mean, like, I'll do it as my own opinion piece in a video or in a Facebook status or something like that. I'll do it as a whimsical opinion piece, but I wouldn't do it to an actual religious person, because, you know, my opinion behind closed doors or whatever it is, or I guess not behind closed doors, but my personal opinion is not the same as how I would actually approach someone, because they're a human at the end of the day, and that needs to be taken into consideration. So anyway, I'll leave the video there, but thank you for watching. Hope it hasn't been too depressing for you. I know there's some heavy topics here, but hope you're having a good day, and I'll catch you on the flip side.